Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is U.S. Immigration Attorney Hardam Chapathy from Trip Law. Today, we're going to talk about the EB3 visa timeline and how to speed it up. So one of the biggest situations we get here at our law firm is that we see that a lot of clients are calling in, they've done all the hard work with our law firm, everything's been submitted, and then their EB3 visa is then going through the processing with the government. And they always ask, well, how do I speed this up? We want to get that visa quicker and get it sooner rather than later so we can get to work and basically do a good job here in the United States. So how do we basically speed it up? What do we do as this immigrant who wants to provide these valuable services to these great United States of America? How do we speed that up? So today we're going to talk about that, and we're going to discuss the options you have as the immigrant working with your law firm, and we here at Trip Law will help you with that. And working together as a team, we will try to do our best to expedite that timeline for you. Now, if you do need to give us a call, our phone number here is 863-599-6735, and we look forward to working with you on that EB3 visa timeline. So now let's just jump right in. So usually you have options, right? When you're applying for that EB3 third preference category, you have different buckets that you can basically choose. There's always these other workers buckets or skilled workers buckets. These are the ones that you'll most likely see with faster processing times. So you may want to basically select that as the actual category within the EB3 process to basically speed up the processing times based on the priority dates that you'll see on the visa bulletin. So basically you want to make sure that you have when you're as the immigrant, you want to make sure that when you're hiring or getting hired, by the employer, it should be an employer that usually has a lot of experience, right? So you want to choose that U.S. employer with a history of successful green card sponsorships. They've already had other immigrants who have gone through that process through the EB3 program and who have had a very high pre-approved prevailing wage rate acceptance. They've also done a good job on making sure these things are being done and documented properly from the employer standpoint. So you want to make sure that they have a track record, right? You want to make sure that they're successful. So that's where choosing the right U.S. employer does a lot for your case right off on the front end of it, right off the bat. The other thing is you want to look at that availability of labor, right? Because some jobs are going to have faster perm processing and perm certification times because they're going to be in higher demand, right? They're not contested by U.S. workers. As we all know here, basically with the EB3 program, you're coming in as an employee for this employer, and you're basically in an industry where this job is really needed, where it can't be filled by U.S. workers, and that's why you as the immigrant brings that special set of skill sets that can then add value to that company and to the United States. So you want to look at those labor statistics and the availability of labor, and we'll go through this with you here at our law firm, so that way you can find out what's the best job to apply for, because some jobs do have faster perm processing timelines compared to others based on what the need is for that specific job and the demand for it. So something to really consider as well. The other thing you want to do is also you want to take advantage of premium processing when it's available. What premium processing is it's a very good tool where you can actually pay the government a little bit more money, but they'll process it within 15 business days to ultimately make sure that you're able to get that application, the administrative processing, make it go quicker, right? Because ultimately you're paying for that service, that premium processing service. So unfortunately, for the perm side of it, for perm processing with the Department of Labor, there is no premium processing. It's not allowed. So you can't really do anything at that point. But when you get to USCIS and with the I-140 immigrant petition process, premium processing is available. So that's a good thing. You want to take advantage of that because as of the date of this video, for $2,805, you can actually get a decision or an RFE within 15 business days, which basically expedites your case rather than waiting months at a time. Now you're getting it in 15 days, business days. So that's a really good offer that USCIS does provide. And if you have the funds to put into that, then it's highly recommended that you do go through that premium processing, because it's definitely available for the I-140, and why not use it if it is available. Now for the I-485, that's where you actually do the adjustment of status on the back end. There is no premium processing, but one really great thing is you can actually do concurrent filing, which will help you ultimately speed up the process per se, because now you're not having to wait for the I-485 process on top of the I-140 process. So you can actually do, if it's available to you, if the facts align, you can actually do that concurrent filing of the I-485 to save time on the process. So that's actually a really good benefit as well. Another thing you want to do is you want to look at concurrent filing like we had discussed based on what's going around in the world and the visa bulletin. If your visa bulletin says it's current, you can definitely go move forward with the concurrent filing. So for example, we get a lot of Bangladeshi clients. I'm going to use Bangladeshis right now as an example. But basically, if the visa bulletin, right, shows for EB3 on the priority visa bulletin, the priority date, you have to look at that country as all other countries, right? Because there's going to be countries, for example, like China, India, Philippines, Mexico, that are going to have longer processing times due to the quotas that are present for those countries. But if you're, for example, from Bangladesh or any other third country that's not China, Philippines, India, those four that I had stated, then basically you can look at that priority date, and if it shows current, you're good. You can then do the concurrent filing. But basically, you have to wait for that priority date to come. So that's one thing you have to do. And you have to be actually lawfully present already in the United States. And that way you can file the I-140 and the 485 together, which can shave off a lot of months off of that timeline and ultimately get you a faster processing overall to help you with your employment. The other thing I want to talk about is also the visa bulletin itself. Very important you monitor that visa bulletin. It comes out every month. And let's say you're a Bangladeshi person or someone from another home country, and your country's listed there, you'll see it on the visa bulletin. Now, because it does change month to month, you want to make sure that it's not basically retrogressing, or if it's not basically getting more longer. You kind of want to look at that. You kind of want to look at, all right, what is my timeline here based on that month, right? Because if the backlogs go up, right, for example, you're going to have a longer priority date, right? The priority date is going to hit later because they're going through the backlog. So, for example, like Bangladesh, they often have current or short backlogs. So for example, as of the date of this video, it's current, then basically you're good to go to apply for that concurrent filing. But you want to stay up to date on that visa bulletin based on that State Department website, where you want to type in visa bulletin, and you can actually check the visa bulletin dates for that EB3 category, which is very helpful. The other thing you want to do is you want to also make sure documentation, you're really preparing that documentation in a very concise way, because what will happen is if you're missing documentation, or there's documentation that you don't have that you didn't properly submit, it can cause delays in your application, because then you're going to be issued what's called an RFE, which is called a request for evidence by USCIS or the government, and they're going to want more information. But if you prepare that documentation early and you do a good job at it through our law firm, we stick to the guidelines, the policies, right? So we're very thorough. We'd rather have more documentation than less, which ultimately will ensure that you try to do the best to not get that RFE. So that way, if you don't have the RFE, the process will continue and you'll be able to get that application processed. However, if you do get that RFE, now it adds more time to your timeline, because now you have to provide that information to the government. Sometimes we'll have documents that'll be in different languages, so you have to get them certified and translated. Sometimes there's missing documentation. There could be business documentation that's missing, and that takes time to get, so that ultimately eats up a lot of time when you have to deal with RFEs. So we at our firm pride ourselves for doing a good job so that RFEs are not a concern, but RFEs can come through the process, and if they do, we're happy to help. The other thing you want to look at is if you're eligible for maybe another category, maybe EB3 has a big backlog and the priority date is way far into the future, then in that case, you might want to maybe consider EB2 if you're eligible for it, because if you use a different preference category instead of EB3, let's say you qualify for EB2, which our law firm will do a analysis on, but if you do qualify for EB2, maybe the EB2 date will be probably sooner rather than the EB3 date. So meaning that you will have a priority date that is coming up sooner under the EB2, so it's wiser to then apply for the EB2. So for EB2 cases, it's basically if you have like a master's degree or its equivalent, you qualify for that EB2, which can sometimes move faster than the EB3 backlogs, which ultimately speeds up your case, right, if you decide to do a different category. Now, there's some things you can't expedite, right? So the perm labor certification process takes about 12 months to a year and a half because of that prevailing wage, the recruitment time. There's a lot of statutory time periods you have to look at. Plus, you have to wait on that Department of Labor decision to ultimately get that certification for perm labor certification process. So it could take a long time. So those are things that are outside of your control. But I always say it's kind of like watching your pasta cook. You know, just let it sit, let it cook. The more you keep checking it, it's not going to cook any faster. So there's sometimes those situations where if you're caught up in perm labor certification, just be patient. That is unfortunately something that you can't expedite, but you do want to be patient on it. The other thing is, why are these processing times increasing, right? Well, a lot of these countries have quotas, right? They have limits. There's only so many people from that country that they can process per year. So as a result, you're going to have what's called visa retrogression, and that basically means it's going back in time, and it's taking a lot longer to process that application. And that's also outside of your control, because if you're from a country where a lot of people are applying, such as possibly India or China or Mexico or the Philippines, there's more people from that country applying maybe compared to a country like Bangladesh or Serbia, for example. So it all depends on the country, and that's something that's outside of your control because you're probably born in that country and you're a citizen of that nation. And if there's people applying from that home country, then the backlogs will increase, which means that your priority date will be later into the future rather than sooner. So these are things you can do. And then finally, there's one last thing you can do to speed up your case. If there are unreasonable delays, if it's beyond reasonable processing times, you want to file what's called a mandamus lawsuit. And basically what that is it's a lawsuit where you have the government ultimately make a decision on the case by having a U.S. District Court judge force basically the USCIS to make a decision on the case. So filing a mandamus lawsuit could also be something that can be used to basically mitigate some of those USCIS delays to your I-140 or 485 applications that are beyond standard processing times. So we usually recommend if it's been delayed for over 12 months beyond the initial reasonable processing time window, you probably want to consider this as an option as well. So today in this video, we definitely covered what do I do to ultimately expedite my EB3 and ultimately what to expect when you're going through that process. So if you have any questions regarding your EB3 visa, we're here to assist. We're here to help you make sure that we make this process a little faster for you and also make sure that you don't have that much stress regarding this process. So we look forward to working with you. Please give our office a call if you have any further questions, and we wish you the best with your immigration journey. Thank you and have a great day.